There is a specific smell to a plate carrier after you've worn it for 3 days in the desert. It smells like sweat, CLP, and bad decisions. It's heavy, it chafes, it's a miserable piece of equipment that you only wear because the alternative is getting a hole in your chest. We like to tell ourselves that extremism is a Southern thing. We watch the news about Texas megachurches or Florida school boards, and we sit here in Pennsylvania and think, well, at least we're reasonable. At least we're safe. I have bad news. You are not safe, and we are definitely not all reasonable. If you drive 2 hours north of here, up I-81 to a little town called Newfoundland, PA, you will find a church. It's called the Rod of Iron Ministries. On Sunday morning, the choir doesn't just wear robes, they wear crowns made of bullets. And when the congregation stands for the reading of the word, they don't just hold Bibles, they clutch AR-15s against their chests. They believe the AR-15 is the literal rod of iron mentioned in Revelation. They bless them at the altar. Now you might say, Jim, that's just a cult. That's the Moonies. That's fringe. Is it? Because the man who headlined their Freedom Festival wasn't some hermit in the woods. It was Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor. It was Tom Homan, the former director of ICE. It was Sebastian Gorka. These are the men who are writing the policy for the administration. And they're doing it in a tent in the Poconos where Jesus is depicted holding a sniper rifle. We don't have to look at Texas to see the militarization of the church. It's happening in the Poconos. It's happening in Lititz. It's happening in York, Pennsylvania. The call is coming from inside the house. Today, we are looking at the Pennsylvania insurgency. We are going to talk about the pastors in our own backyard who have traded the cross for the sword and why they are so desperate to turn the Keystone State into a theocracy. I'm Jim. This is False Foundation. Let's start with the visual, because it's the most visceral example of stolen valor we have. If you go to Newfoundland, PA, you will find a pastor, Sean Moon. He is the son of the late Reverend Moon, the founder of the Unification Church, but Sean had a falling out with the family business. He decided his father wasn't kinetic enough. So he started the Sanctuary Church, or the Rod of Iron Ministries. His theology is simple. Adam and Eve lost the Garden of Eden because they were unarmed. Therefore, the AR-15 is the key to restoring the kingdom of God. I want you to picture the scene at their annual Freedom Festival. It looks like a county fair, but instead of prize pigs, they have the car arms booth because Sean's brother, Justin Moon, owns car arms. Convenient how the theology requires you to buy the product the family sells, isn't it? But look at the speakers on stage. You have Ivan Raiklin, the self-proclaimed Secretary of Retribution. You have Michael Flynn preaching a holy war. And in the crowd, you have families, regular Pennsylvania families, getting their rifles blessed. This is stolen valor at its most absurd. I've carried a weapon for a living. A rifle is not a religious icon. It is a tool. It is a machine designed to destroy tissue. It gets dirty, it jams, it requires maintenance. When you put it on an altar, you aren't worshiping God, you're worshiping power. You are admitting that your faith isn't enough to make you feel safe. You need the cold steel of a receiver extension against your cheek to feel like a man. I have said this before, and I will say it again. This is offensive. Those of us who have actually participated in real-world combat operations look at these people and roll our eyes so far that we have a clear view of our brainstem. These folks sit in their air-conditioned, tax-exempt churches and talk about a holy war. There is no honor in what these people are doing. It is all performative to reinforce the absurd idea that they are somehow engaged in an ethereal conflict. The only battle that these people will ever fight is in their own minds and maybe on X. What they are fighting for is ideology, it is supremacy, and it is entirely un-American. The Rod of Iron Ministries is the shock troop wing of the movement. They are the ones who make the news because they look crazy. But they are a distraction. While you are staring at the guy with the crown of bullets, you are missing the guy in the suit who is actually writing your laws. The guys with the crowns aren't the ones that keep me up at night. Crazy is easy to spot. You know to stay away from the guy shouting at a stop sign. The dangerous ones are the ones wearing blazers in Lancaster County. Let's talk about the Mid-Atlantic Reformation Society, or MARS. They are based right here in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. Their leader is a man named Joel Saint. Joel Saint doesn't wear a crown of bullets. He goes to county commissioner meetings. He is polite. He is articulate. And unlike Sean Moon, he isn't playing soldier. He is playing governor. Listen to what he says. He isn't asking for prayer in schools. He is advocating for theonomy. That is a fancy theological word that means replacing civil law with biblical law. This goes back to a theologian named R.J. Rushdoony. If you hadn't heard that name, write it down. R.J. Rushdoony is the Karl Marx of the Christian right. He invented Christian Reconstructionism. His big idea? Democracy is a heresy. The Constitution is a mistake. He believed that the only valid law is the Levitical law of the Old Testament. And yes, that includes stoning people for crimes that we consider basic liberties. Joel Saint is a disciple of Rushdoony. In his own writing, specifically an article titled The Sound Doctrine of Theocracy or Statism, Joel frames the entire American experiment as a choice between God and tyranny. He writes, and I quote, "We must choose theocracy or we will get tyranny." This guy doesn't want a seat at the table. He wants to flip the table over and burn it. And look at his policy. He went to a Lancaster County Commissioner meeting and argued against government aid to the poor. He asked the commissioners, is justice taking money from the productive to give it to the unproductive? He calls charity theft. He calls compassion statism. He basically stood in a public forum and argued that Jesus would have hated Section 8 housing. And here's the update. You might look for Mars online and see their blog hasn't been updated in a while, like 4 years. You might think, oh, they went away. No, they just rebranded. They are now operating under the banner of the future of Christendom. Why the name change? Because Mid-Atlantic sounded too regional. Future of Christendom sounds like an empire. And that is the goal. They want to create a Christian caliphate. They have coined the term from their new legal system, Lancastrian theonomy. It sounds quaint, like a type of rose, but what it actually means is no legislature. In their world, men don't write laws. God wrote the laws 3,000 years ago, and Joel Saint is just here to enforce them. So we've talked about the muscle, the rod of iron. We've talked about the brains, Mars. But there's a third group operating in Pennsylvania right now, and they're the ones doing the actual damage. They are called the Independence Law Center, or ILC. They are the legal special forces for the right. Based in Harrisburg, funded by the PA Family Institute, which is funded by, well, we can guess. They are crawling all over our school districts: Hempfield, Penn Manor, Elizabethtown, Warwick, West Shore. If you go to a school board meeting in any of these districts, you will hear board members reading policies that sound identical. Policies about bathroom bans, policies about book bans, policies about banning trans athletes. That isn't a coincidence. It is a franchise model. Here's how the scam works. The ILC approaches a radicalized school board. They say, hey, we see you want to fight the culture war. We will draft these policies for you, and we will do it pro bono. Free. That is the hook. They act like they are doing the district a favor. We'll even defend you if you get sued. So the board hires them. They pass the model policy that the ILC wrote in Harrisburg. And then the chaos starts. In Penn Manor, the community begged the board not to hire the ILC. Parents showed up. Teachers showed up. They presented petitions. The board ignored them. They pushed the ILC contract through. And the cost wasn't just lawsuits. It was lives. In Penn Manor, shortly after these hostile policies began to circulate, a trans student named Ash Clatterbuck took his own life. I want you to sit with that for a second. We aren't talking about abstract theology anymore. We aren't talking about funny hats and crowns of bullets. We are talking about a legal machine that enters a quiet community, radicalizes the school board, targets the most vulnerable kids in the hallway, and then pushes them until they break. And when the dust settles and the lawsuits start flying, costing the district millions, the ILC lawyers just pack up their briefcases and move on to the next district. They don't care about the cost because for them, Ash wasn't a student. He was collateral damage in a holy war. They are exploiting the lack of interest of the people here. Christian supremacists have been able to exert pressure on the lowest levels of government because most people simply don't care enough to pay attention. While we are all focused on our jobs and our families and our futures, there are legions of pastors and lawyers that are engaged in an astroturf movement to convert school boards and, by extension, your children to a militant form of a Christian cult. They're hoping that you don't notice until it's too late. This is the tactical application of theology. Mars provides the theory, the ILC provides the weapon, and you, the taxpayer, you are just funding the battlefield. So how do they justify this? How do they convince regular church-going folks to support this? They use a myth, a story. You'll hear this phrase a lot in PA, the Black Robe Regiment. If you talk to Bill Cook or any of these patriot pastors, they will tell you that during the Revolutionary War, the pastors were the real generals. They claim that the clergy led their congregations into battle against the British. They want to be those men. They want to be the generals of the new revolution. But here's the stolen valor again. It is bad history. The term Black Robe Regiment was actually a British insult. And while some pastors did fight, the founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, were not trying to build a theocracy. They were Enlightenment thinkers. They were terrified of religious war. I covered the Black Robe Regiment in a previous episode of False Foundation. That is why they wrote the First Amendment, not to protect the church from the state, but to protect the state from the church. They knew what happens when a priest gets to write the laws. You get the Inquisition, you get the Crusades, you get the 30 Years' War. These modern black robe guys want the authority of the founders, but they reject the principles of the founders. They want the uniform, they want the title, but they don't want the liberty. I want to pause here because usually when we talk about politics in this country, we are trained to use soft language. We are trained to say things like, we have a difference of opinion, or we just see things differently. We are told that in a polite society, we have to respect every viewpoint, even the ones that make our skin crawl. I'm done with that, and you should be too. Because what is happening in Pennsylvania, what is happening in this country, is not a difference of opinion. Disagreement is when we argue about the tax rate. Disagreement is when we argue about zoning laws or how much money to spend on infrastructure. That is not what this is. We are watching a fundamental conflict between two incompatible definitions of what it means to be a human being. On one side, the side of the regressives, the theocrats, the CNP, you have a movement that is defined by subtraction. Look at their platform. Look at what they actually do when they get power. They do not build. They do not create. They do not expand. They remove. They want to remove books from the library. They want to remove history from the classroom. They want to remove rights from women. They want to remove health care from trans people. They want to remove voters from the rolls. Their entire ideology is based on the idea that the table is too crowded. They look at America, this messy, beautiful, diverse experiment, and they don't see potential. They see a mistake. They see too many people with too many freedoms. And their goal, their only goal, is to whittle it down until the only people left at the table look like them, think like them, and pray like them. They seek to marginalize anyone who doesn't fit the mold. They seek to minimize any history that makes them feel uncomfortable. They seek to discredit any science that contradicts their Bronze Age worldview. And they seek to disenfranchise anyone who might vote against them. That isn't politics. That is oppression. That is the definition of a bully. A bully doesn't want a relationship with you. A bully wants you to disappear. Now look at the other side. And I don't mean the Democrats or the leftists. I mean the humanists. I mean the progressives. I mean the people who actually believe in the promise of America. Our movement is defined by addition. We want to extend freedoms. We want to see more people vote, not fewer. We want more people to have health care, not fewer. We want more books in the library representing more voices, more experiences, more perspectives. We operate from a core belief that humanity is a positive-sum game. We believe when my neighbor has rights, I don't lose mine. We believe that when a trans kid is safe in school, my kid isn't in danger. My kid is actually safer because they are growing up in a world that values kindness over cruelty. We want to see all of humanity benefit from a shared core of ideas: reason, empathy, science, liberty. We want a society where you can worship any God you want, or no God at all, and still be treated with the exact same dignity as the guy in the pulpit. That is the difference. One side wants to build a fortress to keep people out. The other side wants to build a table where everyone can sit. And the reason the right is so angry, the reason they are buying plate carriers and stocking up on ammo, is because they know they are losing the moral argument. They know that subtraction is a losing strategy in a world that wants to grow. So they have to use force. They have to use intimidation. They have to use stolen valor and fake authority because they don't have the consent of the governed. I need you to understand the stakes here. This isn't about red versus blue. This is about liberty versus oppression. When they ban a book, they aren't protecting children. They are oppressing ideas. When they ban a medical procedure, they aren't protecting life. They are oppressing bodily autonomy. When they gerrymander a district to silence black voters, they aren't securing elections. They are oppressing democracy. We have to stop pretending that these are valid political tactics. They are not. They are acts of aggression against the citizenry. The paradox of tolerance states that if a society is tolerant without limit, its ability to be tolerant is eventually seized or destroyed by the intolerant. We have reached that limit. We cannot agree to disagree with a movement that wants to strip mine our civil liberties. We cannot find common ground with people who think that some of us don't deserve to exist. There is no middle ground between I have the right to exist and no, you don't. The time for polite disagreement is over. The time for calling it what it is has begun. They are regressives. They want to drag us back to a time when they held the whip. We are the progressives. We are moving forward, and we're not going back. You have to decide which side of that line you are on. Are you here to help, or are you here to control? Are you here to build, or are you here to burn? Because you can't be both. You cannot claim to love liberty while you are actively working to take it away from your neighbor. That isn't patriotism. It's hypocrisy. So here's the question I know you were asking. Jim, how can these people call themselves patriots? How can they wave the flag while they try to burn down the very thing that flag represents? It's because they don't believe in the America you believe in. You believe in a constitutional republic, a place where power comes from the consent of the governed, a place where we the people get to decide our own future. They believe that is a heresy. And I'm not using that word lightly. R.J. Rushdoony called democracy the heresy of democracy. He said that the phrase "we the people" is an act of rebellion against God. In their minds, the people have no right to make laws. Remember Joel Saint's Lancastrian theonomy. No legislature, no Congress, no school board. Why? Because in their worldview, men cannot make laws. God already made the laws. We just exist to enforce them. So when they call themselves patriots, they aren't talking about the Constitution. They are talking about a covenant. They believe America made a blood oath with God in 1620 and that their job, their holy war, is to force this country back under that oath, whether you consent to it or not. They don't want a republic. They want a caliphate with a different flag. There is nothing more American than we the people. There is nothing more anti-American than we the enforcers. The men running the Rod of Iron Ministries and Mars and the Independence Law Center, they rely on you being confused. They rely on you seeing the flag and the Bible and assuming they are on your side. They are counting on your politeness. But remember the plate carrier. Remember the Velcro. It's a costume. And the man wearing it isn't here to defend your freedom. He's here to take it. These groups have been effective over the course of the last half century in reprogramming their congregations into giving up their autonomy for authority. They now bow to the idea of Christian supremacy. and they aren't even remotely interested in what you believe or how you think you should live your life. They want to be the ones making those decisions for you. They want to be able to tell you which race is the right one. They will define what a marriage is for you, and it isn't between same-sex couples. They'll dictate what women can and cannot do with their own bodies. And they'll be more than happy to tell you which version of their religion is right and that all of the others are not only wrong, but evil. Many people have been sending up flares about this movement for a long time, and we've been told that we're overreacting to a bunch of incels getting mad on social media. But now those incels are in power. They are running our country directly into the ground, and it's going to take a lot of work to save it. We are the ones carrying the torch for the founders now. The founders were imperfect men, but they set a trajectory. They pointed the ship towards a more perfect union. Every time we expand rights to women, to people of color, to the LGBTQ community, we are moving that ship forward. Every time regressives try to stop us, they are trying to sink the ship. So don't let them lecture you about American values. Oppression is not an American value. It is the thing we fought a revolution to escape. Theocrats are not patriots. They are the redcoats. And just like in 1776, we have a choice to make. Do we submit to the rule of kings and priests, or do we fight for the rule of the people? I know where I stand, and looking at the history of this country, I know which side eventually wins. Regressives make a lot of noise. They break a lot of things, but eventually, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. It bends that way because we are the ones pulling it. I'm Jim. This is False Foundation.